This isn't the kind of story I'd ever planned to share with anyone. It's messy, complicated, and leaves me questioning how blind I've been these past months. But it keeps replaying in my mind like a bad movie, and the only way I can think to let it go is by putting it out there. So, here it is. Just last week, I woke up to my phone buzzing with a notification. It was 3 a.m., and I was barely awake, but I noticed it was a message from some random guy on Facebook. Strange. I almost ignored it, but something made me open it. What I saw jolted me awake instantly. This guy, Brandon, had sent a message along with several screenshots. In his text, he wrote, "Hey man, I don't know if you're aware, but Michelle has been seeing other guys. I figured you should know and thought you might want to see this." An icy chill ran through my chest as I read those words. Brandon wasn't just some random dude, he was actually on Michelle's friend list. We'd met him once at a mutual friend's party, and he seemed like a decent guy, which only made this more unsettling. I opened the first screenshot, and there it was, Michelle's messages to him. They weren't innocent. They were intense. She was saying things to him I hadn't heard her say to me in years. She used pet names she used to call me, telling him she'd never felt this way before. It stung, especially since those were the same lines she'd once told me. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The other screenshots revealed a group chat, each guy trying to outdo the other with flirty comments, and Michelle, my Michelle, playing along like she was single and loving the attention. There were at least 5 different men in the mix. Reading those messages felt like an out-of-body experience. Each line felt like a blade twisting in my gut, especially when I saw her sharing the same photos she'd once sent me early in our relationship. The flirty texts, the playful tone, she was acting like a carefree single woman, not someone in a committed relationship. Without thinking, I called her. She'd told me earlier she was grabbing coffee with a friend. She didn't answer. I tried again, then again, but my calls went to voicemail. Something snapped, and I decided to drive to the cafe she mentioned. She wasn't there. Neither was her so-called friend. I stayed in the parking lot, waiting and watching the minutes tick by, half an hour, then an hour. My hands were trembling as my mind raced with every worst-case scenario. The drive back home felt surreal, like I wasn't fully in control of myself. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, anger and disbelief surging through me. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car, staring at the house, the place we'd built together, where we'd dreamed of forever. Now it just felt like a facade, a lie. I was still sitting there when her headlights pulled into the driveway. She must have noticed me because, as soon as she stepped out of her car, her face carried that familiar look, the one she gets when she's preparing to explain away something she knows will upset me. I'd seen it plenty of times over minor things, but this time it made my blood boil. I stayed put, watching as she walked over to my window. Her expression was calm, maybe even slightly irritated, like I was the one being unreasonable. She knocked on the glass. I rolled it down just a sliver. Her voice came through soft but condescending, as if she were scolding a child. "What are you doing sitting in the car at 2 a.m., Eric? Seriously, what's your problem?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the door, stepped past her, and walked straight into the house. She followed me in, letting out a small, nervous laugh, like she thought this was all some big misunderstanding she could smooth over with a joke. I headed to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the messages from Brandon. I scrolled until I found the one that hit me hardest, a selfie she'd sent another guy, complete with that coy, flirty smile I hadn't seen in ages, telling him she couldn't wait to meet him again. I handed her the phone. She looked at it for barely a second before letting out a laugh, shaking her head like it was some ridiculous prank. "What's this? Who sent it? You're not seriously believing this nonsense, are you?" Her tone was so casual, like we were talking about a wrong order at a drive-thru instead of a gut-wrenching betrayal. I just stared, unblinking, as her smirk gradually faded. One by one, she clicked through the screenshots, her face losing color with every swipe. For a brief moment, I thought I might actually see her break, show some shred of regret. But no. She met my gaze and said, "Wait, you're upset over Travis. You know he's full of it, right? The guy's obsessed with me. He's just trying to stir up drama to make you jealous." I was floored. She wasn't denying anything. Instead, she laughed off the messages like they were some small, irritating blip in her day. My fists tightened at my sides, and it took everything I had not to slam them into the wall. "It's not just him, Lauren," I managed to say through clenched teeth. "There are 4 other guys." 4. My voice wavered, raw with emotion, but I held her gaze, refusing to give her an out. Her next words landed like a sucker punch. "You're being ridiculous, Chris," she scoffed, her tone sharp and dismissive. "You're really going to let some screenshots ruin your day? Guys talk big, you know that. You're blowing this out of proportion." She said it with this smug look, like I was some kind of insecure idiot losing it over nothing. I stood there, frozen, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the person I thought I knew. "So, let me get this straight," I said, forcing myself to sound calm even though my voice was shaking. "You're saying these messages just appeared out of nowhere? That Travis and the rest of these guys all made this up?" She sighed dramatically, tossed my phone onto the counter, and shrugged with an air of absolute indifference. "Believe whatever you want. I can't help it if other men are drawn to me. That's just part of looking like this." Her smirk was the final straw. She spun on her heel and started up the stairs, leaving me standing there like a fool. She acted like the conversation was nothing more than an inconvenience, a waste of her precious time. Something inside me broke. Years of trust, of devotion, evaporated in an instant. I had been desperate to see even a flicker of remorse in her, but all I got was arrogance. She wasn't sorry, she was proud. I inhaled deeply, trying to rein in the fire raging in my chest. It was as if every happy memory we'd ever shared was being consumed, one by one, leaving behind only ashes. Watching her saunter halfway up the stairs, calm as ever, made it worse. "Lauren, stop," I said, my voice low but firm. She paused on the steps, not bothering to turn around. Her posture radiated indifference, as though she was debating whether I was even worth responding to. "You're really just going to walk away?" I asked, louder this time. "After everything I just showed you, proof of you messing around with 5 different men?" Still, she didn't move. My voice cracked as I shouted, "Look at me, Lauren. Don't you feel even the slightest bit of shame?" Finally, she turned her head, glancing at me over her shoulder. Her expression was maddeningly neutral, completely devoid of emotion. Her response came in a flat, clipped tone, "Chris, I've said all I'm going to say. I don't know what's gotten into you, but I'm not going to keep justifying myself because you're insecure." A bitter laugh escaped me, harsh and hollow. It echoed in the quiet house like a ghost of everything we once were. "Insecure? Don't even try that, Lauren. This isn't about me being paranoid, it's about you betraying me. Stop pretending this is some kind of petty misunderstanding." I grabbed my phone again, scrolling through the screenshots like I could force her to acknowledge the truth. I wasn't just angry, I was desperate for her to feel something, anything. "This isn't just about Travis," I said, my voice tight with barely controlled anger. "This is Paul, Jared, Mitch. Are you seriously going to stand there and pretend they're all lying? That every single one of them made this up?" Finally, her composure cracked. She spun around to face me fully, her eyes blazing with frustration. "Fine, Chris. You want the truth," she snapped, her tone dripping with mockery, her gaze piercing. "Yeah, I've been seeing other guys, more than a couple, actually." But maybe if you'd been even half as exciting or fun as they are, I wouldn't have had to. Her confession hit me like a freight train. I froze, the air in the room feeling heavy and suffocating. My mind went completely blank. It wasn't just an admission, it was an attack. She wasn't apologizing, she was flaunting it. She stepped down a few stairs toward me, closing the space between us with slow, deliberate movements. Her voice turned sharp and cutting, each word like a blade. You want to know something else, Chris? Every single one of those guys, they actually know how to make me feel wanted. They don't sit around like you, sulking and second-guessing every little thing I do. They know how to have fun. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Maybe if you'd kept up with me, you wouldn't be standing here feeling sorry for yourself right now. Something inside me shattered. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the way she twisted the knife, making it clear she didn't feel an ounce of guilt. The woman I thought I loved wasn't standing in front of me anymore. She'd been replaced by someone who reveled in tearing me apart. I couldn't speak. I couldn't yell. I just turned away. Grabbing my jacket off the chair by the door, I felt the weight of her stare on my back. As I reached for the handle, her laugh echoed through the room, a cold, bitter sound that sent a chill down my spine. Where are you going, Chris? Running away so you don't have to face the truth? I stopped and glanced back, my voice calm but colder than I'd ever heard it. I'm done, Lauren. Done with you, done with this. We're over. Without waiting for her reply, I opened the door and stepped out, slamming it shut behind me. The sound reverberated in the quiet night as I walked away, feeling a strange clarity settle over me for the first time in weeks. This was the end. I got into my car and drove, not caring where I ended up. My grip on the steering wheel was so tight my knuckles turned white. Her words kept replaying in my head, each one sharper and more painful than the last. It felt like she'd been holding all of this in, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash her anger and contempt. And that smug, dismissive look on her face, that smirk, it was burned into my mind. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot on the outskirts of town. The silence around me felt deafening as I sat there, staring blankly at the dashboard. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, breaking the stillness. I picked it up and saw a text from an unfamiliar number. Hey, this is Travis. I didn't mean to cause problems between you and Lauren. I just thought you deserved to know. My stomach twisted at the sight of his name. Travis, the guy who had pulled the curtain back on everything. I'd stormed out without asking him for more details, but now I needed answers. I dialed the number, and he picked up immediately, his tone hesitant. Chris? I didn't think you'd call, but... Tell me everything, I cut him off, my voice barely steady. No half-truths, no holding back. I want to know exactly what's been going on. There was a pause, and then he sighed heavily. All right, he said, his voice resigned. I'll tell you everything I know. He cleared his throat, his voice tinged with unease. I met Lauren a few months back through mutual friends. She mentioned she was technically married but made it sound like you two were on the verge of breaking up. She said you were distant, that you didn't pay attention to her, and that being home felt like a prison. The words hit me like a sucker punch. I'd been there for her every single day, doing everything I could to make things work. And this is what she told him? It was almost too much to take in. Travis continued, his tone awkward. She'd flirt, you know? Kind of in that, make me feel alive again way. At first, I thought she was just messing around, blowing off some steam. Then one day, she asked if I wanted to grab drinks, just the two of us. Things escalated from there, and, well. He hesitated, leaving the rest unsaid. But I didn't need him to spell it out. I knew exactly what he meant. Was it just you? I asked, my voice tight, barely holding it together. Speaking felt like forcing broken glass through my throat. No, he admitted quietly. I figured out pretty quickly that there were other guys. She didn't talk about it openly, but I picked up on it. That's when I stopped seeing her. I'm not proud of any of it, man. I didn't know what she was telling you, and I didn't want to keep being part of something like that. My thoughts were a whirlwind. Travis wasn't even the only one, he was just another name in a growing list of people she'd been deceiving, using, and stringing along with lies about me. Why tell me now? I asked, trying to steady myself. I felt guilty, he said plainly. Listening to the way she talked about you, it didn't sit right with me. I figured you had the right to know what was really going on, even if I'm part of the mess. He hesitated, then added, "Look, I don't know what else to say. If you need anything from me, I'll help however I can. But I get it if you don't want to hear from me again." I didn't reply. I just ended the call and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. His guilt meant nothing to me. It didn't undo what had happened, didn't change the fact that he'd knowingly crossed the line with her, married or not. I leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes as a thought began to form in my mind, a list. I needed to know every single person she'd been involved with. Each name was a piece of this twisted puzzle, revealing a version of Lauren I never knew existed. But it wasn't just about understanding anymore. It was about confronting the lies, the betrayal, and the chaos she'd created. And one thing was clear, Lauren wasn't going to walk away from this untouched. When I finally got home, the house was dark and eerily quiet. I half expected her to be in bed, pretending none of this had happened, like always. But as I stepped inside, I saw her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a blank expression. She glanced up when I entered, her face showing no trace of concern or guilt. Instead, her look was cold and impatient, as though I was inconveniencing her by walking through the door. "Back already?" she said with a sneer, her irritation barely hidden. Her tone rolled off me. I was past caring about her condescension, past trying to find any trace of the woman I once loved. I stepped forward, ignoring her venom, and dropped my phone onto the coffee table with a loud thud. Then, leaning down until my face was just inches from hers, I locked eyes with her, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "We're not done here," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension. "I want names, Lauren. Every single one." She leaned back, smirking as if this was all a game. "What for? So you can play private investigator? Or maybe you're planning to cry to them like you did with Travis?" Her head tilted slightly, her eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and contempt. "Don't even try to flip this on me," I snapped, my tone sharp and unforgiving. "This is your mess, and you know it. So tell me, Lauren, how many are we talking about? Or is it too many for you to keep track of?" She let out a cold, mocking laugh that echoed in the silence. "You want a number? Fine. 7, maybe 8. Happy now? And guess what? Every single one of them knew exactly what they were signing up for." Her words hit like a gut punch. She said it so casually, like she was rattling off the score of a meaningless game. 7? 8? My head spun as I tried to wrap my mind around it. I'd braced myself for 1, maybe 2 at the worst, but this? This was betrayal on a level I hadn't even imagined. "Unbelievable," I muttered, my voice laced with bitterness. "You've been throwing yourself at random strangers, acting like a teenager desperate for attention, and yet you have the nerve to call me pathetic?" She shrugged, that smug smirk still plastered on her face. "You just don't get it, do you? I don't owe you an explanation. You're the one who's boring, predictable, stuck in the same dull routine. You wouldn't know excitement if it hit you in the face." She crossed her legs and leaned back on the couch like she was royalty holding court, completely unfazed. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay composed, even as anger bubbled beneath the surface. So that's your excuse? You were too bored to stay faithful, so you decided to turn our marriage into some kind of joke? She rolled her eyes, her expression full of disdain. What marriage, Chris? The one where you sit around acting like everything's fine while I'm out actually living? Don't fool yourself. You were always just convenient. Her words left me speechless, the sheer coldness of her tone twisting every memory of our life together into something unrecognizable. For a moment, I wanted to shout, to get a rise out of her, to crack through that wall of indifference. But deep down, I knew she was baiting me, and I refused to give her the satisfaction. So you used me, I said quietly, my voice low and steady. While I was here, building a life with you, you treated it like some kind of game. Well, here's the thing, Lauren, games have consequences. For the first time, her expression shifted ever so slightly. Her eyes narrowed, just a hint of uncertainty breaking through. Oh? And what exactly are you planning to do, Chris? A slow, bitter smile spread across my face. You'll find out soon enough. I turned on my heel and headed for the stairs, her sneering silence trailing behind me. Each step I climbed felt like stoking a fire that had been smoldering ever since I'd first seen those messages. Lauren had done everything she could to tear down our life and laugh about it, but I wasn't about to let her get away unscathed. Once I reached our bedroom, I closed the door behind me, shutting out the chaos below. The silence gave me space to think, to plan. I knew Lauren too well, she was banking on me either blowing up in anger or crumbling under the weight of her words. But if she wanted to play games, I'd make a move she wouldn't see coming. I went to the closet and pulled down the box where we kept all our important documents, bills, contracts, and everything else I'd barely thought about before tonight. As I sifted through the papers, I found exactly what I was looking for, her financial records. For years, she'd leaned on me to keep her afloat. Her job barely covered her personal expenses, and I'd been the one footing the bills, transferring money into her account without a second thought. Now, those details felt less like facts and more like ammunition. She thought she could walk all over me, leave me in the dust without a second glance. But she was about to learn that actions have consequences, and I was done playing the fool. But now? I wasn't just thinking anymore, I was plotting. I picked up my phone and opened her list of contacts, scrolling through names and numbers. One name jumped out at me, Jared. It was the same name that had come up in the screenshots Travis had sent. I recognized his number among her most recent calls and messages. Without hesitation, I took a screenshot of her call log, then did the same for a few other frequent contacts. Slowly but surely, I started piecing together everything, each name, every call, every text that revealed the double life Lauren had been living behind my back. Then a new idea hit me. Why should these guys get off scot-free? Most of them had to know she was married, or at the very least, taken, and yet they still went along with it. They weren't innocent. I opened a blank group text and began typing the message I'd already composed in my mind. Congrats, gentlemen. You've all won your place in the game Lauren's been running. You got a piece of her freedom, but you also got something else, the aftermath. Hope she was worth it. I hesitated for just a moment, my finger hovering over the send button. Then, with a deep breath, I pressed send. The message went out to every single one of them, a direct hit, accompanied by a warning that would haunt them long after this night. It didn't take long for my phone to start buzzing. First, Travis responded, his reply filled with panic. Wait, what do you mean? Aftermath of what? Then came Jared, a string of question marks, each one more frantic than the last. The others chimed in too, their confusion and desperation evident in the flurry of replies. One by one, they scrambled for answers, blindsided by the same truth that had wrecked me just hours earlier. I didn't bother responding to any of them. Let them sit with it. Let them feel even a fraction of the betrayal and chaos I was drowning in. I watched as their frantic messages piled up, their panic palpable through the screen. The satisfaction, however, was fleeting. Sure, they were panicking now, but it didn't undo what Lauren had done. The weight of her betrayal still sat heavy in my chest, sharp and unrelenting. No matter how much these guys squirmed, they weren't the real problem. The one person I needed to face, the architect of this entire disaster, was Lauren. I went downstairs, my footsteps echoing through the house. She was still lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. When I stopped in front of her, she finally glanced up, her expression annoyed. "What now?" she asked, her tone dripping with impatience. "Are we doing another one of your dramatic little speeches?" She set her phone down with a smirk, folding her arms as if daring me to continue. I took a steadying breath, my voice calm and even. "I hope you're ready for what's coming, Lauren. You thought this was just a game, treating me like an idiot, stringing along God knows how many guys. But here's the thing, it's your turn now." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound, crossing her legs with an air of mock curiosity. "Oh, really? And what exactly are you going to do, Chris? You're not exactly the get-your-hands-dirty type." "That's where you're wrong," I said, letting a cold smile spread across my face. "Because I've already started. I just sent a little message to your friends, Travis, Jared, all of them. Right now, they're all panicking, trying to figure out what kind of mess they've stepped into. Did you think you could walk away from this unscathed, leaving chaos in your wake? Not this time." For the first time, I saw her mask slip. Her smirk faltered, and something like worry flickered in her eyes. She tried to brush it off, laughing again, but her voice wavered slightly. "You're bluffing. They don't care. They're not going to lose sleep over some message from a guy they don't even know." "Oh, they care," I said, my tone cutting and steady. "And they're going to start questioning everything, Lauren. They're going to wonder what else you've been hiding, who else you've been lying to. And maybe, just maybe, they'll realize that they've been played, just like I was." I leaned in close, letting every ounce of bitterness drip from my words. "And here's the best part, unlike me, they won't stick around once they see who you really are." She swallowed hard, her confidence cracking ever so slightly. It was small, but I noticed it, a fracture in the armor she wore so smugly. She tried to cover it up with an eye roll and a scoff, but the fear underneath was unmistakable. She wasn't invincible. She wasn't untouchable. And now, she knew it. I didn't wait for her to respond. Straightening up, I grabbed my keys off the counter and walked toward the door without looking back. "Where do you think you're going?" she called after me, her voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob, glancing over my shoulder for one last look. "I'm leaving, Lauren. And unlike you, I actually mean it." I opened the door and stepped out, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. As the door clicked shut behind me, a strange mix of emotions surged through me, anger, hurt, and something new, relief. There was no going back now, and for the first time, I didn't want to. Walking away from the house felt surreal, like I was leaving behind not just a place but a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. The anger still smoldered under the surface, but as I got into the car, a flicker of something else emerged, a sense of freedom. A glimpse of the life that might be waiting for me on the other side of this chaos. I started the engine and drove, no destination in mind, letting the stillness of the night seep into my thoughts. For the first time in years, it felt like I was shedding a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Every mile I drove felt like a step further away from the lies, the manipulation, and the version of Lauren I had clung to for far too long. But even with that newfound sense of freedom, something inside me wasn't finished. I pulled off to the side of the road, my hands gripping the wheel as my mind raced. The silence around me was deafening, amplifying the storm still raging within. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts, debating my next move. Part of me craved closure, something definitive to mark the end of this nightmare. And then it hit me. I opened Facebook and began typing, each word deliberate, every sentence like another brick sealing the door on this chapter of my life. To everyone who knows Lauren and me, here's the truth. For months, Lauren has been leading a double life, seeing multiple men behind my back while lying to all of us. I stayed loyal, and she treated our marriage like a joke. For anyone who thought they knew her, this is the reality. Lauren, enjoy the freedom you've been chasing. I'm done. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my finger hovering over the post button. A part of me hesitated, questioning if this was the right thing to do. Would it make me look petty? Would it give her an opportunity to play the victim? But then I remembered her smug smile, the lack of remorse in her voice, and the way she had so easily dismissed me and everything we'd built together. This wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. I hit post. The response was immediate. Notifications flooded my screen as comments, messages, and reactions poured in faster than I could read them. Some people expressed shock, others sympathy, and a few were clearly just there to watch the drama unfold. I scrolled through the reactions with a strange sense of detachment, not really absorbing the words. It didn't matter what anyone else thought, the truth was out there now. Lauren couldn't hide behind her lies anymore. For the first time that night, I felt a sliver of peace. It wasn't complete, and it didn't erase the pain, but it was enough to remind me that I was moving forward. And that was something. It didn't take long before my phone buzzed with a message from Lauren. Take it down. Now. I swear, if you don't. I let out a low, bitter laugh, shaking my head. Her threats didn't have any weight anymore. She had no leverage, no power left to hold over me. Before I could even put the phone down, another message came through, and her tone shifted from threatening to pleading. Chris, come on. This isn't fair. We can work this out. Just take the post down, and we can talk. You're being petty. I could almost hear her voice in my head, dripping with that fake sweetness she'd mastered over the years. It was the same tone she used to twist situations, to manipulate me into thinking I was the problem. But this time, I didn't respond. I left her on read. For too long, she'd painted me as the gullible, desperate husband, mocked me while weaving her web of lies. Now, she could sit in the mess she'd created. I turned off my phone, leaned back in my seat, and looked up at the stars. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a calm settling over me, a strange, unexpected peace. The next morning, my phone was flooded with notifications. My post had spread farther than I'd anticipated, reaching people I hadn't spoken to in years. Friends, family, old acquaintances, they were all chiming in. Some offered words of support, others expressed shock, and a few were clearly just there for the gossip. But one message stood out, it was from Lauren's mom, Susan. Chris, please call me when you can. I'm so sorry for what you're going through. I had no idea it was this bad. Susan and I had always been close, closer than most people are with their in-laws. Over the years, she'd become like a second mother to me, and her concern felt genuine. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to talk about everything again, but I knew I owed her a response. I dialed her number, and she answered almost immediately. Chris, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't even know where to start. I saw your post last night, and I'm so sorry. I had no idea this was happening. If I'd known, I would have tried to talk some sense into her. Hearing the pain in her voice softened my anger, if only a little. Susan, this isn't on you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Lauren made her own choices. I just needed people to know the truth after everything she put me through. She sighed heavily, her regret audible. I understand. I really do. I just wish she'd come to me instead of doing all of this. I didn't raise her to treat people this way. I don't know what's gotten into her." Her voice cracked, and I could hear the struggle in every word. There was a pause, and then she added, "Chris, no matter what happens, I want you to know that you're still part of this family. You've been like a son to us, and nothing Lauren's done will ever change that." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had to pause, swallowing the lump in my throat. Lauren might have torn apart our marriage, but her family had become a cornerstone of my life. Losing them would feel like losing another piece of myself. "Thank you, Susan," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That really means a lot. I don't know what's next, but I think I just need some time to figure it out." "Take all the time you need," she replied gently. "We're here for you, no matter what." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, letting her words sink in. It was strange, realizing that even in the wreckage, there were still people standing by me. That day, I tried to clear my mind, hoping to move forward, but the weight of everything still lingered. The love and trust I'd poured into our marriage had been shattered, leaving behind anger, hurt, and questions I couldn't yet answer. Later that evening, my phone lit up again. This time, it was Lauren. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, and her voice came through sharp and furious. "Chris, how could you do this to me?" she snapped, her tone dripping with indignation. "Do you have any idea how many people have called me? They're laughing at me. You've made me look like a complete joke." Her words were almost laughable in their audacity, but I stayed silent for a moment, letting her desperation fill the space between us. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done, she was sorry for being exposed. Hearing the panic in her voice brought a cold sense of satisfaction, but I kept my tone steady. "Lauren, I didn't make you look like anything. This is all on you. You lied to all of us, over and over, and you thought you'd never face any consequences." She let out an exasperated sigh, then shifted her approach. Her voice softened, laced with the same manipulative sweetness I'd heard too many times before. "Chris, don't you think you went too far? I mean, I know I wasn't perfect, but airing all of this out in public? Don't you think we can handle this privately, just the two of us?" I couldn't help but laugh, the sound sharp and bitter. "Privacy? Now you care about privacy? Where was that concern when you were sneaking around with half a dozen other guys? You didn't care about us then, so why should I protect you now?" The line went silent for a moment. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter, almost pleading. "Chris, we had good times, didn't we? I know I messed up, but we don't have to end things like this, do we? I got caught up in, I don't know, something stupid. But we can fix this. We've been through so much together." Her audacity almost made me lose my composure. She was reaching, clinging to the fragments of our past as if that could erase everything she'd done. Like it was that easy to rewind and pretend none of it had happened. "Lauren, stop. We're done," I said firmly. "I don't know how you convinced yourself that playing with people's lives like this was okay, but I'm not going to be part of it anymore. You wanted excitement? Freedom? Fine. It's yours. I'm out." There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her tone had shifted, frustration creeping into her words, now sharp and venomous. "Fine, Chris. If that's what you want, then leave. But don't act like you're some kind of saint. Maybe you were never enough for me in the first place." Her words stung, but not in the way she intended. They stung because they confirmed exactly who she had become, a person who would rather tear everything apart than admit she was wrong. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay composed. "Maybe you're right, Lauren," I said quietly, my voice calm and resolute. "Maybe I wasn't enough for you. But I'll be enough for myself, and that's all that matters." Before she could respond, I hung up. The click of the call ending felt like closing the final chapter of a story I'd been trapped in for far too long. I set the phone down on the table and exhaled deeply, a weight lifting off my shoulders. There was no more waiting for apologies that would never come, no more clinging to hope that she'd realize the damage she had caused. I'd given her every chance, every opportunity to prove she cared, and she'd shown me exactly who she was, time and again. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was free. Free from her lies, her manipulation, and the heavy burden of trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally move forward.